From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of InFocus. I'm your host, Patrick Berry. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. It's on your cell phone, it's on your computer, it's also in our local schools. I'm very happy today to be joined by Richard Parr. He's the Vice President of MassInc Polling Group. And recently, Rich, you guys did a study to get the reactions of parents about their thoughts of AI being introduced into our schools. Give me the overarching thought process behind this poll.
Yeah, so this was a poll that we did with our client, Education Trust in Massachusetts, which is a nonprofit that's really focused on centering the parents' voices in the education debate. So, you know, we hear from school districts all the time, we hear from the teachers all the time, but what do parents really think about things? So twice a year for the past 6 years, starting back during COVID, we've been doing polls of parents. So you have to have a parent in the K through 12 public schools in order to qualify to take this poll. And we do them twice a year. And this year in the fall, we did a survey about artificial intelligence and other technology issues in the schools.
But AI is everywhere. I mean, it literally is now everywhere, from your car, if you've got a car that's been built in the last few years, to, like I said, cell phones, it's everywhere. How do you keep it out of your schools? I don't think you can you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting findings I found in this survey was that parents are really kind of in the dark as to about how AI is being used in the schools, could be used in the schools. I think 51% of the parents in this survey said they didn't know whether AI was being used in their children's classrooms right now. So, and smaller numbers, but still significant, about a third or so, maybe a little higher, were telling us that they weren't sure whether their school even had a policy about AI. Like, is AI okay? Can the students use it? Can the teachers use it? Right? So this is like a new thing for a lot of schools and for a lot of parents, and they're trying to figure it out for themselves. They're trying to figure out how their kids are using it, but they're also trying to figure out how their schools are using
it. And you bring up that last comment, how the schools are using it. This project didn't get into that. This is just about the parents' reaction, the parents' thoughts on how artificial intelligence is being or proposed to be used in schools.
Yeah, well, we did ask parents about various things that schools could use AI for, which is not to say that they are necessarily using them in those ways. And we got some feedback on kind of what would be more acceptable to some parents. What would parents be comfortable with versus what they'd be?
Are they, I guess, in that comfortable versus uncomfortable, is it more uncomfortable? Did the percentages show more uncomfortable than comfortable?
Yeah, it really depends on the use. And what I would say that the big dividing line that I found is grading, assessments, like judging how your kid is doing in school. Parents were okay with AI being used to help kids who have IEP plans, individualized education plans, helping multi-language learners. So maybe there's some translation uses of AIs that could help the students communicate with their parents, communicate with their teachers.
Okay.
They were okay with like helping to brainstorm lesson plans or tutoring programs or things like that. But where they were less comfortable was if the AI is being used to make grades, to assess student performance, to like give feedback to students on assignments and things like that. That's where they really want that human teacher touch to still be present.
It's funny. I didn't even think of that aspect of AI. I'm still thinking of a student hands in their homework, and here I am making the gesture of paper homework, which doesn't happen anymore, but a student hands in their homework, and a teacher, a human being, will still pour through each of individual students' homework, but that's might not be the case.
Well, I think that now we're seeing that, first off, AI is being used to help sniff out AI in the students' homework, because one of the things that we found in this survey is we asked parents, are your children using AI for their schoolwork? And 59% of them said that yes,
Really?
in some respect, that their kids had been using AI. It's highest among like the high school kids and lower among the grade school kids, which I think makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
Then, and we're talking about things like checking the grammar in their essay, right? Or maybe help with a math problem, or coming up with ideas for an essay or something like that. Those are the most common uses of AI by
So
students.
the students aren't using AI to do the homework. They're
Well, so
using as sort of AI as an assist.
you would
Like you
hope.
said, the grammar. Well, you're right.
Right.
Good point.
And then again, this is what parents know that their kids are doing, right? So
Right.
we're not, there's always going to be a little bit of a gap there. It's kind of, but what the parents are perceiving is that the majority of them are saying, yeah, my kid has used this in some way, shape, or form. And what they're a little bit less aware of is whether or not the schools in turn are using it in some way to teach or to grade or to, even just to do kind of administrative stuff and free up time for teachers.
Were you generally shocked at the results, or were the results sort of what you expected?
I think, well, there's a lot in the survey where parents are very up in the air, very
Okay.
divided. So, for example, we like to start our surveys with sort of an open-ended question.
Mhm.
So we're not giving anybody, any prompting. We're just saying, what do you think? We gave them a definition of AI and then said, what do you think about the use of this in education? And about a third of parents were like, I think this could be a good thing. About a third of parents were like, no, this is going to be bad. And then the other third were mixed or neutral, right? They could see the benefits, they could see the pitfalls, right? And I think that that's indicative of kind of where we are culturally around AI,
Right.
about schools, and in general. It's like there are people who see the pros of it and the cons, but there's a lot of people who are kind of trying to process both in the middle and are not quite sure where they're going to land. So that didn't super surprise me. What did surprise me a little bit was some of the things that people thought AI would be useful for. So we asked people, there are different aspects of learning.
Right.
We want kids to learn how to read. We want them to write, to do math, to critical thinking. For a lot of those things, people thought that AI would be negative or neutral. The things that they actually thought it would be helpful with were digital literacy and kind of judging information sources.
Okay.
And I found that super interesting because that's actually the opposite of what I was thinking of. When I think of AI, I think of like deep fakes. I
Right.
think of like being able
Yeah.
to not tell whether the information you're seeing on
Same here, yeah.
your screen is good or bad or true or real or not real, right? So, but some parents think that AI might end up being useful in that way, which I thought was super interesting. So sometimes people answer questions in a way you don't expect when you do.
Right.
Paul.
Right. We're up on our first commercial break, but plenty more to talk about when it comes to artificial intelligence in our schools. Stay with us. We're back in a moment.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of InFocus. Sitting across the desk from me today from Mass Inc. Polling is Richard Parr. They have recently issued the data from a study that was conducted in 2025 about artificial intelligence use in our local school systems. Rich, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. This just kind of backtracking a second. This poll was done in conjunction with the one you and I talked about last time, which was cell phones in schools, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually the exact same poll, exact same people. We just had some questions about banning cell phones from schools in that poll, and we decided when we got the data back, oh wow, this is like super interesting, and it's a little bit different than the rest of the poll. Let's put that out early as a teaser of sorts, and then we put out the rest of this. I think forget when we did this. Late last month was when
Okay.
we did the release event on this. So for this client, we always do a big release event where we had a person from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to react to the findings and talk about what is the state doing, what is the state telling school districts to do about AI,
Mhm.
and then we had a whole panel of a superintendent, a parents advocate, and somebody actually from the business community talking about how they're all reacting to AI and what are they seeing about AI in the school right now.
I have to imagine, but maybe not, an underlying concern about student privacy.
Yes,
Did
definitely.
was that part of the results? Was the parents concerned about student privacy?
There was definitely a concern about that. We asked people we kind of raised some specific issues. And what we found was that a majority of people, kind of in the 70s actually, 70%, were at least somewhat concerned that students' data could be used to feed these AIs, because of course AI is trained basically on the information that it's collecting, right? Whether it be from the internet or from these student
Right.
essays and things like that. So that was a concern. Another concern was that AI has biases, right? Because it's being trained on stuff on the internet. What if those biases create a misperception and then your student writes an essay or something and it gets the evaluation of that essay is biased by the way that the AI is biased? That could be a potential concern as well. So there's all kinds of things that could go wrong with this. And in general, we found more parents were concerned about the problems than were comfortable with the uses that we were putting forward for them, to the potential uses of AI in the school. And again, those would be things like helping teachers develop lesson plans or do some administrative work, even all
Right.
the way towards like grading assignments.
Through any of the release party, for lack of a better description,
Yeah.
from the parent groups, the superintendents, the representatives from DESE,
Hmm.
I guess the parent groups, they may have been participants in the poll, but the superintendents and the representatives from DESE were not. Were those two groups, were they shocked at the findings? Were they understanding of what the parents' concerns were? And
Yeah.
did they have any sort of, I guess maybe it was too soon to tell, but like a game plan of going forward with AI?
Yeah, so the state does have guidance for school districts. That was one of the things that they presented on at our event. So the good news is that there are people at the state level who are thinking about this. And then the superintendent, it was the superintendent we had was the superintendent of the Chelsea Public Schools back
Mhm.
east, was talking a little bit about just sort of like the on the ground experience of this. I think one of the things that came up when we were briefing all of our panelists about the poll was how you define AI for people, or asking people what they mean by AI, can be really important, right? Because how experienced people are with it in their own lives can affect how they feel about how their kids would use it.
Well, I have to imagine, kind of like my own personal belief. When I hear AI, I think of a negative connotation, that deep fakes, misinformation. So that might answer that point of parents' perception of what AI is.
Yeah. So we did a focus group as a companion to this poll. We often like to do that when we're on a new topic, like AI is such a brand new thing.
Mhm.
We wanted to understand, just to listen to people, like, how are you talking about this? And that would inform some of the questions that we could ask people in the survey. And what we found in the focus group was really interesting, that there were some parents who use AI in their jobs now, and were a little
Okay.
bit more comfortable with it
Okay.
because of that. And they also sort of felt that regardless of how they felt about it, it was important to expose kids to, because this is the way of the world. This is something that they're all going to have to deal with at one point or
Right.
another. There are other parents who are less familiar with AI or weren't using it for their jobs, and they had a little bit more of a negative view. They were skeptical of it. They were nervous about it. Some people raised the environmental impacts of AI. These data centers are generating, a huge demand for
Exactly.
electricity that needs to be met. Um, there was also an interesting gender divide in the focus groups that came through into
Really?
the survey as well, which is to say that men are a little bit more comfortable about AI being used in schools, a little bit more comfortable with about it having a positive effect on kids' learning. And women were a little bit less comfortable with that, and a little bit less
Hmm.
willing to see it in the schools, a little bit more worried about some of the impacts on learning.
When I think about it, I also think you think about what the fundamental goal is of a school. It's teaching children to think critically, analyze problems, solve problems. Is there a fear that instituting AI will eliminate basically the fundamental goal of education?
I think that there's a risk that if people use it too much, that it could be a problem. The woman who
Okay.
presented at our event from the state actually had used the analogy of an electric bicycle, right? So you have these electric bicycles now, and there's a mode on the electric bicycle where you keep pedaling,
Mhm.
but it gives you a little push. So
Right.
maybe you're coming up that hill, need a little bit of help, and so you use the electric bicycle to help you get up the hill. That's a good use of AI, right? That we're using it as a tool to help with the learning, and that the student can use it, but they're still having to put the thought into the essay or the math problem or whatever.
Okay.
But some of those electric bicycles also have a little throttle, and you can turn the throttle and then not have to pedal at all.
Yeah.
And then the bike is doing all the work for you. And that's the thing that I think, want to avoid with AI in schools. We do not want the AI to be able to be used in a way where the student has to put zero thought into the entire process.
And that makes perfect sense because, I mean, if a student is only using AI, then they're not learning.
Right.
They're learning how to create prompts to get information to submit to get a good grade.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
really no, again, kind of coming back to my original question about the fundamentals of learning of what school is all about.
Yeah, and this is something that is impacting so many industries right now. I mean, in
Yeah.
the survey business, we're seeing, the potential of AI being used by respondents to help them answer surveys. And then on the other side, there are people using AI to help write survey questions. There are people who are using AI to sniff out the AI in the
Right.
responses, which is just such a fascinating cat and mouse game. I should say we don't really do a lot of that at my work, but I mean, it is. I've gone to conferences and conventions and events, and I've seen these tools that are out there, and it's like the new thing that everyone is pushing. And I would imagine if it's happening in the survey industry, it's happening in the educational industry as well.
Absolutely. We are up on our second commercial break, so stay with us. We're back in just a moment.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's edition of In Focus. We're having an important conversation about artificial intelligence in our schools. Sitting across the desk from me from the Mass Inc. polling group is Richard Parr. He's one of their vice presidents. Rich, thank you so much for joining me today. As we're having this conversation, my kids are well out of school. Not far out of college, but out of our community schools. As a parent, I would think my student using AI, my child using AI, would be considered cheating, right? You mentioned early on in this conversation that sometimes AI could be used for grammar checks, whatever it might be. Even that, I think, is, it's cheating. It's easy to just, like, if you and I are using, a Microsoft tool or whatever, and it's going to pop up, this word is spelled incorrectly. Okay, well, I may never know how to spell that word correctly. I'm just going to hit the change, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I would think AI in our schools flat out is cheating. Was that one of the questions and one of the concerns that was part of this poll?
It was, yeah. We did ask that question, and you would be in the minority, actually.
Really?
Yes, really. Like only 19% of parents said that using AI for schoolwork would be cheating all of the time, right? So, there's a lot of nuance on these things. So, if I'd asked the question as a binary, like yes or no, is it cheating? I bet you we would see more people who would say yes. But we found 19% said that it's always cheating. 14% said it's not cheating at all. They were fine with it. And then the rest of people, 65% or 2/3 of parents, were basically in the middle and saying, yeah, it depends.
Okay, yeah.
It depends on the use, right? So maybe checking grammar isn't cheating, but if you have AI write your entire essay for you or come up with the outline of the
cheating.
essay and then you have to fill it in, that's a problem, right? So I think parents are grappling with a lot of the nuances of this. It's such a new concept. It's very clear that people are kind of thinking it through as they're going and and trying to figure out what's acceptable and not acceptable. And of course, if your kid is using it, and again, 59% of parents in this survey told us that their children were in some way using AI some of the time. Well, I mean, that suggests that would you want to really think that your child is a cheater? That's a problem too.
Right.
So,
Well, no one wants to say that,
yeah.
but we again, I think of AI as eliminating the creativity of a person. It could be you or I in our day jobs. I mean, how many times have we heard CEOs of companies are caught in giving a speech or issuing a memo or an email or something that's been traced back to AI information? That again, my own personal beliefs. Let's talk a little bit more about the parental side of this. What interesting details did you get from the poll that we haven't shared yet from the parent side?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we asked was we wanted to understand kind of how involved do parents want to be in the discussions around AI in their community school? right?
Or do they want just the school department or school district to issue an edict of here's what it's going to do?
Yeah. Well, first off, that would help a lot because as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of the policy stuff they don't even know. They don't know if their school has an AI policy for the students. They don't know if it has a policy around, you know, the student data in AI. They don't know if it's being used at all. So there's a lot of very opacity around
Okay.
what's going on with AI right now. But when we ask people, how involved do you think that you would want to be, the parents should be? You know, what we tended to find was that people kind of go up to the line of parents should actively participate in the discussions about AI in their school districts. 35% of parents were there. That was the plurality. Only 11% parents think that parents should be the deciding factor, right? So parents should not have a
Agreed.
veto here.
Yeah.
Parents should not be the ones overruling teachers or the school district, but they do want to have involvement. They want to be consulted, they want to be informed, they want to be part of the discussion. So if there's a school committee meeting or a PTO meeting or something, they want AI to be part of that debate, and they want to be able to have their say about it. But I think they stop short of saying, like, I'm going to sign a waiver and say that
Right.
Sally or Billy can't use the AI in the school, because I think they're worried also that AI might confer an unfair advantage on certain students. If some people have access to it at home or
Right.
have a computer at home that can do these things and they don't, then that could be a problem too.
Again, I think a successful student upon graduation of high school can all be brought back to parental involvement from day one. So the more involvement a parent is, the more successful the child will be. So I agree with that there should be some level of parental involvement, just because it's shown, the data has shown that parental involvement, even long before AI, parental involvement in schooling creates a better and more successful child.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's the other thing that the parents need to think about is like how, try to keep an eye on how kids are using this, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
there are these getting beyond just the education thing, that there's been some concerns and studies about these chatbots students or the kids are talking to all the time. And some of them are almost using them as like a surrogate friend or something like that.
Exactly.
And those chatbots are designed to agree with you over and over again. That's the feedback mechanism of that particular software. And that can create a bad situation for kids. So being aware of what your kids are doing online, being aware of what your kids are doing with AI is probably important, not only for their schooling, but for their mental health and well-being also.
Absolutely. Richard, I can't thank you enough for joining me today to have this conversation. Website again is
massingpolling.com. That's our website. That's where we put up all of our studies that we do for all of our different clients. And of course, they also put them out into the world as well. But you can go and find all of the data on this study up there, and a bunch of other stuff that we've been doing too.
Fantastic. Good seeing you. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Good to see you too.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.